It was fourth period on a Thursday at Eisenberg High in Elkhart, Indiana, the kind of day where the minutes seemed longer than the lessons, and students stared at the clock more than they did the board. The air in Mr. Braddock's calculus classroom was heavy with the smell of old erasers and worn-out sneakers. Phones buzzed quietly under desks. Some kids stared blankly through the windows. Others half listened, just trying to make it to lunch. Mr. Braddock was the kind of teacher people tolerated more than liked. He was sharp, impatient, and carried a habit of using sarcasm where understanding should have been. That day, as he scratched out another dense equation across the whiteboard, a faint squeak echoed from the hallway. Outside the door, a janitor's mop moved in slow, steady arcs across the linoleum floor. Braddock paused mid-sentence, glanced toward the sound, then turned to the class with a smirk. "Well, look who's here," he said, nodding toward the doorway. "Mr. Dorsey, think you can solve this one?" A few students laughed quiet, uneasy chuckles. Not cruel, but unsure. The man in the hall was just the janitor. He was always there, quietly pushing his cart, cleaning up what others left behind. No one ever asked him anything, certainly not to step up to the whiteboard. But Lamar Dorsey didn't flinch. He stood there in his forest green uniform, sleeves rolled, a mop in one hand, the name L. Dorsey stitched neatly over his chest. He looked into the room for a long moment, then gently leaned the mop against the wall and stepped inside. "You mind if I give it a try?" he asked, his voice calm and low. Mr. Braddock raised an eyebrow but stepped aside. "Be my guest." The room grew still. Phones slid out silently. A girl in the third row whispered, "Is he serious?" But nobody stopped him. Lamar picked up the marker. He studied the equation with a thoughtful squint, like someone reading an old map he'd walked 100 times. Then without flourish, he began to write. Line by line he worked. His voice filled the room in a slow, steady rhythm. "This here's a chain rule problem," he explained. "But it's cleaner if you spot the inner function first." His tone wasn't showy, just honest, patient. When he finished, the board was full, neat, clear. He capped the marker and stepped back. "That's one way to do it," he said simply. No one moved, not a breath, not even Mr. Braddock. And just like that, the quiet man with the mop had changed everything. Lamar Dorsey didn't set out to change anything that day. He hadn't touched calculus in years. But the moment he stepped away from the whiteboard, the quiet whispers began to swirl like wind before a storm. Kids who had never looked twice at the janitor were now asking each other, "Did you see that in the hallway between classes, the video Carly Benson had filmed was already bouncing from phone to phone, shaky and unpolished, but unmistakable?" There was Lamar calmly solving what most students could barely follow. By lunch, the video had landed on TikTok, then Instagram. The caption read, "Our janitor just schooled the calculus teacher." Some laughed, some just stared. But the ripple had started, and it wasn't stopping at Eisenberg High. In the teacher's lounge, the buzz wasn't much different. "You're telling me he did that in his head?" asked Miss Lynn, the physics teacher, pausing mid-bite into her sandwich. "He did," said Mr. Crane from English. Didn't even blink. Just walked up and broke it down like it was second nature. Mr. Braddock sat in the corner pretending to grade papers. He hadn't said a word since Lamar walked out of his classroom, mop in hand, leaving behind silence and something deeper, something that rattled the walls. Principal Everett finally spoke. "He's been with us for 6 years. I don't think anyone knew he had an academic background." And that was the truth. No one knew. Not really. Lamar Dorsey showed up early, stayed late, and never made waves. Floors were spotless. Paper towels restocked before anyone asked. He worked in the background, and that's how he liked it. He wasn't chasing a second chance. He was just trying to keep the lights on. But numbers had always followed him, even after everything fell apart. That afternoon, Principal Everett asked Lamar to stop by the front office. Lamar came in still wearing his gloves, damp from cleaning under the cafeteria sinks. He removed his cap out of habit, always respectful. Lamar Everett said gently, "Can I ask you something? Do you have a background in education or engineering? Lamar looked down for a moment, not in shame, more like he was brushing dust off a long-forgotten part of himself. I went to Purdue, he said softly. Mechanical engineering, full ride. Everett leaned back, eyebrows raised. You serious, Lamar nodded. Had plans, but things got complicated. And for the first time in years, Lamar shared a story he'd kept to himself. He grew up in Gary, Indiana, a bright kid who took apart old radios just to see how they worked, then put them back together with fewer screws and better wires. His mother, Estelle, raised him and his two sisters on her own. She worked long shifts at a textile plant, but still came home to read to them every night. Education, she always said, was the only key that would open doors that life tried to lock. Lamar carried that key with pride. Valedictorian, state science fair champion. Then the Purdue scholarship his mother cried when the letter came. Freshman year, he was already tutoring classmates. Professors noticed. His name meant something. Then came the call. His mother had collapsed at work. The diagnosis came fast, late-stage cancer. By the time Lamar made it to the hospital, she could barely keep her eyes open. I can handle it, she whispered. Don't come home. But Lamar did. He dropped everything class's dorm future and took a semester off. Then another. Bills piled up. His sisters were still in high school. The weight of the world had no cushion. I kept thinking I'd get back, Lamar told the principal. Just needed time. But life doesn't wait for you. Everett said nothing. The air between them was still, heavy, not with sadness, but with the quiet ache of understanding. After she passed, Lamar tried to piece things together, but the dream had scattered. There was no home to return to, no money to pick up where he left off. He worked nights, warehouse jobs, grocery stock rooms, janitor shifts at strip malls, anything that kept his sisters afloat and the power from being shut off. At first, he called Purdue a few times asking about re-enrolling. They mailed forms. He filled them out, but something always got in the way. Rent, a broken-down car, a sister who needed him. Then came what felt like the last shot. A man named Frank Booker in South Bend offered Lamar steady work at his flooring company. You're sharp, he told him. Don't waste your time pushing brooms. I'll train you myself. Lamar felt something flicker, hope maybe. A chance, but the day before he was supposed to start, his youngest sister, Alana, got into a fight at school. A stupid argument turned bad, a broken nose, suspension. Maybe worse. Lamar had to be there. No one else would show up for her. He missed his first day. Frank gave the job to someone else. That was it. I stopped chasing dreams after that, Lamar said quietly. Started chasing stability. Years blurred. Town to town, job to job. He never got in trouble. He never got back on track. He just kept moving forward the only way he knew how. When he arrived in Elkhart in his early 40s, he wasn't looking for a second chance, just a steady paycheck. The school district had benefits. Summers were quiet. The janitor job suited him fine, predictable, clean. No expectations. But the math never left him. Sometimes as he passed a classroom, he'd glance at the board and finish the problem in his head before he reached the next hallway. Just to see if he still had it. He always did. He just never had a reason to show it. Until Mr. Braddock pointed at the door that day and turned a tired old mop into a ticket back to something forgotten. Now Lamar couldn't ignore it. Not the students waiting outside his supply closet. Not Wes Hanley holding out a calculus problem and asking Mr. Dorsey, "Can you check this for me?" Lamar had helped him, gently, patiently, never made the boy feel small for getting it wrong. That connection had stayed with him. And for the first time in a long while, Lamar Dorsey felt something inside begin to stir. Not ambition, not glory, but purpose. A quiet kind of purpose that didn't need titles or applause, just a little time, and someone willing to ask. Lamar Dorsey never meant to go viral. He didn't even know he had gone viral. Monday morning came like any other. He parked in the same spot, rolled his mop cart down the same hallway, and started the day by fixing a jammed paper towel dispenser in the girls' bathroom near the science wing. He still used a flip phone, didn't have an Instagram account, didn't follow TikTok trends. While his story was making its way across the internet, he was down on one knee with a screwdriver, tightening a loose bracket. But outside that quiet routine, everything was different. Students greeted him in the hallway with nods, not the awkward, distracted kind they used to give, but real ones, with respect. One girl near the library called out, "Hey, Mr. Dorsey, you're kind of famous now." Lamar paused mid-step, his expression mild. "Don't believe everything you read," he replied with a soft chuckle. But when he turned the corner near the guidance office, 3 students were waiting. Wes Hanley stood among them holding a calculus textbook open to a page with a highlighter marking a dense equation. "Would you mind going through this with us?" Wes asked. We made time." Lamar blinked. "You got a free period." "We made time," Wes repeated with a small smile. So right there in the middle of the hallway, lockers on one side, faded science fair posters on the other, Lamar sat down cross-legged on the floor. The 3 students huddled around him. He leaned forward and started to explain. No show, no rush, just steady, careful guidance. He asked questions before giving answers. Let them work through it. Someone down the hall caught it on video again. No one told Lamar. He wouldn't have liked it if they had. Meanwhile, back in the main office, Principal Everett was on the phone with someone from the district office. "Yes, that's right," he said. "Lamar Dorsey. He's been with us 6 years. No, he's not faculty. He's a custodian." A pause. "Then I wouldn't call it unorthodox. I'd call it overlooked." In the teacher's lounge, Mr. Braddock was sitting alone with his laptop open. An email from a parent had landed in his inbox. No subject line, no greeting, just a link to the viral video and the words, "Thought you'd want to see this." He didn't click it. He closed the screen, face unreadable. Later that afternoon, Principal Everett called Lamar into the office again. "I've had a request from the board," he said. "They're wondering if you'd be willing to run an after-school tutoring group. Small, voluntary, just a trial." Lamar shifted in his chair. "You'd be paid, of course," Everett added quickly. "It's not about changing your current role. Just sharing what you clearly still have." Lamar looked down at his hands, callous, steady, clean. "I haven't taught in a long time." "You haven't stopped knowing," Everett said. Lamar didn't answer right away. "I'll think about it," he finally said. That evening, he pulled the old cardboard box out from under his bed. The one with the faded Purdue sweatshirt, his transcripts, and a photo of him and his mom taken at orientation day. He hadn't touched it in years. He laid everything out on the kitchen table, the corners of the papers yellowed, the ink still clear. That was the thing about knowledge. It doesn't rot. It waits. The next day, Lamar didn't change anything about his routine. Still mopped the cafeteria floors. Still replaced a broken light bulb in the boys' locker room. But something in the school had shifted. You could feel it. A tension. Not ugly, not loud, but present. Most of the students were thrilled. They started calling it Dorsey Sessions. After school in the library, notebooks open, heads bent, Lamar sitting among them like an old friend who just happened to know everything about derivatives. But not everyone was happy. Mr. Braddock had gone quiet, not just during staff meetings or lunch always. Students noticed. Teachers noticed. He no longer cracked sarcastic jokes or challenged kids mid-sentence. His patience wore thin. He never mentioned Lamar, but he didn't have to. His silence said it all. Somewhere between pride and discomfort, Braddock was wrestling with being outshined by a man he'd once waved off with a joke. Then came the phone call to the school board. Not from a parent, not with a name, just an anonymous concern. Is it appropriate for a janitor to tutor students? Is he certified? Has he passed background checks for instructional settings? Principal Everett handled it firmly and quietly. He's an employee of the district, he told them. He's done nothing wrong. And if this were a genuine concern, they would have come to me directly. He never told Lamar about the complaint, but Lamar felt it anyway. Not resentment, just resistance. Some folks didn't know how to see him now that he no longer faded into the background. Still, the students came. Every Tuesday and Thursday, a small cluster met in the library corner. Lamar brought a simple binder with handwritten worksheets in old formulas, sketched from memory. He didn't want a title. He didn't want a desk. He just wanted to help. One afternoon, Carly, the girl who'd filmed the first video, caught him by the vending machine. She handed him a mechanical pencil, brand new. "Did you ever want to be a teacher?" she asked. Lamar paused. "I wanted to build things. Teach later, maybe, but life had other plans." "Well," she said, "I think you are doing both now." He smiled. "Thank you." The school continued to hum, but now something beneath the surface had changed. For the first time in years, a quiet man with a mop was being seen not for what he did, but for what he knew. And that, in its own small way, was beginning to matter. As the days passed, Lamar Dorsey's quiet tutoring sessions in the library began to feel less like a novelty and more like something permanent. They started small, 3, maybe 4 students folding chairs, pulled up around a low table near the back window. But by the end of the second week, word had spread. Some came with calculus books. Others brought nothing at all, just curiosity and a little hope that maybe, just maybe, math didn't have to be terrifying. Lamar didn't put up posters. He didn't send emails. He just showed up every Tuesday and Thursday after the final bell with his binder of handwritten problems and his soft, steady voice. He wasn't lecturing, he was sitting with them. He asked questions before offering answers, listening before correcting. And it worked. Not because he made things easier, but because he made things clear. The students leaned in. They stayed late. Some who had never spoken in class were now explaining formulas to each other, their voices low but confident. They started calling it Dorsey sessions, a name that spread faster than he was comfortable with. The first teacher to take notice was Miss Lynn from physics. She stood in the doorway one afternoon, arms folded, just watching. "You've got a gift," she said softly once the students had gone. "And I don't just mean with numbers." Lamar smiled just a little. "I appreciate that, but not everyone welcomed the change." Mr. Braddock still hadn't said a word to Lamar since the day in the classroom. In the lounge, he acted as if nothing had changed. But his mood told a different story. He spoke in clipped sentences, kept his eyes down, and never mentioned calculus. When a parent brought up Lamar's sessions during a teacher conference, Braddock's response was polite on the surface, but cold underneath. "It's good they're showing interest in math," he said. "Let's just make sure we don't blur the line between instruction and inspiration." The room went quiet after that. Everyone heard the edge in his voice. Principal Everett didn't let it slide. The next morning, he called Braddock into his office. "I know it stung," Everett said plainly, "but Lamar didn't embarrass you. He inspired them." Braddock shifted uncomfortably. "He's not qualified. He's educated," Everett replied, "more than we realized. And more importantly, he's reaching them in a way none of us have." Braddock opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. He gave a stiff nod and walked out without another word. Lamar never asked for any of this. He didn't want to be a teacher, not officially. He didn't want a classroom or a title or a nameplate on a door. But when the principal offered him a small stipend to continue the sessions, Lamar accepted not for the money, but because it felt right. During his breaks, he'd sit in the back corner of the cafeteria binder, Opus sketching out new problems from memory. Occasionally, a student would pass by and call out, "Hey, Mr. D," and he'd raise a hand without looking up, still thinking through equations. He carried himself the same way he always had, head down, gentle smile, never loud. But everything around him was beginning to shift. One afternoon, Carly, the same girl who had filmed that first classroom moment, stopped him in the hallway. She was holding a small plastic bag with a new mechanical pencil inside. "For your notes," she said. Lamar tilted his head. "That's kind of you. Did you ever want to be a teacher?" He thought for a moment. "I wanted to build things," he said. "Teach maybe later. But life had different ideas." Well, she said, I think you're doing both now. He smiled at that, tucked the pencil into his shirt pocket, and kept walking. But not everything was warm smiles and encouragement. Principal Everett received an anonymous complaint from a concerned parent. The message was brief but pointed. Is it appropriate for a janitor to tutor students? Is he certified? Has he been background checked for this kind of work? Everett handled it quickly. Mr. No. Dorsey is an employee of the district, he told the board. He's done nothing wrong. And if the concern was genuine, they would have spoken to me directly. He didn't tell Lamar about it. He didn't need to. Lamar could feel it in the air, an unease from certain corners, not rooted in anything he'd done, but in what he represented now. Some people struggle when the lines they're used to between janitor and teacher, between background and ability, start to blur. Then something happened that no one expected. One Thursday, just before the end of a tutoring session, Mr. Braddock walked quietly into the library. He stood by the bookshelf for a while, arms crossed, watching as Lamar worked through an integral with 4 students gathered around. After 10 minutes, Braddock stepped forward. Mind if I sit in? He asked. Lamar looked up, his face unreadable. Long as you don't mind learning something. The students chuckled. Braddock cracked a smile, soft, not sharp. He pulled up a chair. They sat together in silence for the rest of the session. Lamar didn't ask him to help. Braddock didn't offer. But when the students packed up their bags and left, something had shifted, not just in the school, but between the two men. It wasn't friendship, not yet, but it was a beginning. For Lamar, the moment wasn't about winning anything. It wasn't about proving himself or settling scores. He didn't carry grudges. He carried quiet persistence. What mattered to him was simpler being there when the students needed him. And so every week he kept showing up, not for recognition, not for praise, but because slowly and steadily the school was starting to believe in him. And more importantly, he was starting to believe in himself. By spring, the rhythm of Eisenberg High had shifted. Not loudly, not all at once, but in subtle ways that told a deeper story. The library, once a quiet space mostly used for last-minute homework and forgotten textbooks, now had a heartbeat. Every Tuesday and Thursday, right after the final bell, students drifted toward the back corner where Lamar Dorsey set up a modest table with a binder full of handwritten notes and a few dull pencils. He didn't stand at a podium. He didn't lecture from the front of the room. He sat with them, sometimes cross-legged on the floor, other times leaning forward with a palm under his chin, listening carefully as a student stumbled through a problem, never rushing them. He met them where they were, and that made all the difference. The students came as they were too. Backpacks, half-zipped sleeves pushed up, the weight of the school day still on their shoulders. They came not because they had to, but because something about Lamar made them believe they could. Tasha, a junior who used to flinch at the word algebra, now walked in early and stayed late. Isaiah, a quiet freshman who had nearly failed the first semester, could now solve quadratic equations without breaking a sweat. It wasn't magic, it was patience, presence, someone willing to sit beside them and say, let's figure it out together. More teachers began to notice. Miss Lynn occasionally pulled up a chair just to listen, scribbling Lamar's analogies into her own notebook. Coach Rivera asked Lamar if he'd help set up a summer prep group for incoming freshmen. Even the assistant principal dropped in one afternoon and left nodding in quiet approval. And Mr. Braddock, he started returning too. Not often, not every session. But enough. He'd stand near the back, arms folded, face unreadable, but each time he lingered a little longer. One day he offered an extra problem. Another day he murmured a soft, nice job when a student solved something tricky. It wasn't easy for him. His pride didn't bend without effort, but something in him had softened. The edges had dulled. After one Thursday session, long after the last student had packed up and left, Braddock lingered behind. The late afternoon sun spilled through the tall windows, casting long shadows on the floor. You know, he said, quietly, nodding toward the whiteboard, I used to think this job made me important. Teaching gave me power. Lamar didn't interrupt. But you've reminded me what it's really about. Braddock continued, voice lower now. Showing up, making it count. Lamar nodded gently. We all lose our way sometimes. Braddock gave a small smile, real this time. Then he turned and walked out without another word. Lamar never brought it up again. He wasn't the kind of man who needed to relive moments to validate them. He carried them with quiet pride and moved forward one day at a time. A month later, Principal Everett called him into the office once more. There was a proposal now, something official. The school board was considering turning the tutoring sessions into an elective enrichment course for the next semester. Not for credit, but something formal, structured. We'll have to jump through some hoops, Everett admitted. Certifications, approvals, but we'll take care of all that if you're willing. Lamar listened, hands folded in his lap. I appreciate it, he said softly. Truly. But I don't need the title. I'd rather keep it simple. Let the kids come because they want to, not because it's on a schedule. Everett smiled. Then we'll support you however we can. Word spread slowly at first, then further than anyone expected. A local reporter stopped by to ask Lamar for an interview. He kept it brief. No dramatic speeches, no spotlight stories. I'm just showing them what they already have inside, he said. Sometimes it just takes someone sitting beside you to help you see it. That spring, Eisenberg High hosted its annual student showcase in the gym. There were science boards, art displays, choir performances, and in one quiet corner, a simple booth titled Dorsey's Table. Pinned to the wall were dozens of handwritten notes from students, not just about math, about confidence, about being seen, about how someone who never raised his voice had somehow made them believe in their own. One read, "He didn't give me the answers. He helped me believe I could find them." Another said, "Mr. D didn't just teach us math. He taught us to trust ourselves. Lamar didn't wear a suit. He didn't give a speech. He stood near the table nodding and thanking each student who stopped by. His eyes didn't shine with pride, but with something deeper. Gratitude, maybe. Or quiet awe at the fact that life, even after all it takes from you, can still give something back." That night back home in his modest apartment, Lamar pulled the old Purdue sweatshirt out from the box beneath his bed. The fabric was worn soft at the collar. He didn't put it on. Instead, he folded it carefully, placed it in a new storage bin, and added something else beside it, a folder filled with thank you notes from students, each one written in their own messy handwriting. He paused for a long moment, then closed the lid. Legacy, he thought, isn't about degrees or diplomas. It's about what you leave behind in the people who carry it forward. And somehow, without meaning to, he had built something worth carrying. It didn't happen overnight, but the change was real. Eisenberg High was still Eisenberg. Morning announcements still crackled over the intercom lockers, still jammed, and someone was always late to homeroom. But something had shifted, especially in the way students moved through the building. They smiled more. They asked questions. And in small ways, they leaned into learning, not away from it. The corner of the library where Lamar Dorsey held his after-school sessions had quietly become a place of hope. Every Tuesday and Thursday, just after the final bell, students arrived with textbooks and notebooks, some torn at the edges, some nearly untouched. They brought half-finished homework, old tests with red ink, and questions they were afraid to ask in class. Lamar welcomed them all the same. No sign-ups, no rosters, just a table, a few extra chairs, and the calm presence of a man who had once buried his dreams but never lost them. He didn't run the room like a teacher. He didn't talk at them or command silence. He sat beside them shoulder to shoulder, asking what they saw in the problem and how they'd start. When someone made a mistake, he didn't correct them with a red pen. He asked, "Why do you think that step doesn't quite work?" and guided them back with a kind of grace that left no bruise on the ego. More and more students showed up. Some came because they were struggling. Others came because they were curious. And some came just because it felt good to be there. Isaiah, the soft-spoken freshman, started tutoring others, breaking down problems with the same patience Lamar had shown him. Tasha, who once muttered that she wasn't a math person, now ran weekend mini sessions for her cousins at home using notes she'd copied from Lamar's binder. What had started as a ripple was turning into a current. Teachers noticed too. Miss Lynn asked if she could adapt some of Lamar's methods into her own classroom. Coach Rivera stopped by more often, asking Lamar to help shape a summer prep program for rising ninth graders. Even some of the older students, those who had long since written off math as something they'd never get, were dropping by after sports practice still in uniform to work through integrals with their cleats untied. And then there was Mr. Braddock. No longer defensive, no longer silent, he started showing up consistently. Not every day, but enough. He'd offer a suggestion here, a compliment there. Sometimes he'd drop off a printout of an especially tricky problem and leave it with a simple, thought they might like this. His words were lighter now. The edge had softened. One Thursday afternoon, after the last of the students had left and the library had grown quiet again, Braddock stayed behind. He stood by the whiteboard as Lamar erased equations, the dry marker squeaking softly. You know, Braddock said without looking over, I used to think this job was about control, about being the smartest person in the room. Lamar didn't say anything, just kept wiping the board. But watching you reminded me it's about something else entirely. Showing up, being steady, making them feel like they can figure it out. Lamar paused. We all lose sight of that sometimes. Braddock gave a quiet nod. Thanks for helping me see it again. There was no ceremony, no applause, just a shared silence that carried more weight than words. The momentum didn't stop there. Principal Everett, always thoughtful in his approach, proposed turning Lamar's sessions into a full-fledged elective. It wouldn't be for credit, but it would be recognized an enrichment class built on confidence, clarity, and connection. When he brought it up, Lamar listened patiently. Then he shook his head. I appreciate the offer, he said, truly, but I'd rather keep it simple. Let the kids come because they want to, not because it's on their schedule. Everett smiled. Then we'll support you in whatever way we can. Lamar's humility wasn't for show. He didn't seek recognition, and he didn't expect it. But the students gave it anyway. They called him Mr. D, now always with warmth. They left notes tucked between pages of his binder. One wrote, thanks for seeing me when I didn't see myself. Another scribbled, you helped me believe I'm smart enough. The hallway whispers had changed too. No one was asking, isn't he the janitor anymore? Now they said, that's Mr. Dorsey. One Friday morning as he wheeled his mop cart past the main office, a young teacher stepped out with a clipboard and paused. You're the reason a lot of these kids come to school on Tuesdays and Thursdays, she said. Lamar gave a modest smile. They've always had it in them. I just help them find it. Back in his apartment that night, the windows were cracked open to let in the soft spring air. He sat on the edge of his bed, flipping through his binder, now filled with extra notes and new handouts. He didn't plan on stopping. Not because someone told him to keep going, but because this mattered. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel like someone whose best days were behind him. He felt useful. And that to Lamar Dorsey was more than enough. That spring evening, Eisenberg High opened its doors for the annual student showcase. Families walked the halls with cameras and coffee cups, stopping to admire science boards, watercolor portraits and choir recitals echoing softly from the auditorium. In the far corner of the gym, beneath a hand-lettered sign that read, Dorsey's Table, something quieter unfolded. Pinned along the walls were dozens of notes from students, some written on lined paper, others scribbled on Post-its, a few carefully typed and folded. They weren't just thank yous, they were stories, small, honest reflections from kids who had sat beside a janitor and learned how to see themselves differently. Mr. D didn't just help me with math. He helped me believe I'm not dumb. I used to be scared of numbers. Now I tutor my little brother. He never raised his voice. He just waited until I saw it for myself. Lamar stood quietly by the table. He didn't wear a tie. He didn't give a speech. He just smiled at each student who stopped by, shook a few hands, and nodded his thanks. No one asked about his degree. No one mentioned mops or uniforms. That night, he wasn't the janitor. He was Mr. Dorsey. Later at home, Lamar opened the storage bin under his bed. Inside was the old Purdue sweatshirt neatly folded, and beside it a new folder thick with those student letters. He ran a hand along the top, then closed the lid gently. He didn't need a certificate to know he mattered. He didn't need a title to understand the difference he made. Because sometimes the most powerful teachers don't stand at the front of a classroom. Sometimes they walk the halls, quietly fixing what's broken, until one day they help others realize they were never broken at all. This story reminds us that people are more than what we assume, that the quiet man in the hallway might carry more wisdom than the loudest voice in the room, that kindness, patience, and showing up day after day can be more powerful than prestige, and that resilience doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply waits until someone notices. If Lamar's story touched something in you, if it made you think about someone who once believed in you or someone you might have overlooked, I'd love to hear about it. Please feel free to share your other thoughts, your own stories, or just let me know you were here. And if you'd like more stories like this, real human and quietly powerful, feel free to subscribe. No pressure at all. Just a warm welcome when you're ready. Thanks for listening. Truly.